Hello everyone, welcome back. It's been a while. Sorry, I didn't hear the beep because for some reason my headphones stopped working, but happily the microphone still does. So we're going to read an article here today. There are actually a couple I wanted to go through. You can already see them here, but I'm gonna do them in separate videos because they're both pretty long. So let's take a look at this one. I found this in one of the groups I hang out, Politics and Sociology on Facebook. One of the real shitstorm groups we have on there. There's a whole clusterfuck of groups actually, philosophy, politics, and sociology, and all that stuff. And there's a real flame war going on there. It's pretty hilarious from time to time. But lately I've just been kind of retreated into my own activities. So from time to time I get to see something like this, and usually these posts are the most interesting. So let's just get through this. The government is not a person, and the national debt is not a crisis. Okay, so we're gonna get into some real stuff of my ideas on these subjects and see how you think about them and stuff, because I'm very interested to see people's reactions to that, because I'm not actually very well read on these issues. In a certain sense I am, and in other senses I'm not. I'm very eclectic in what I read, and I'm very politically. It's hard for me to find a standpoint to really agree with. So, but anyway. So the government is not a person, and the debt is not a crisis. At the time, Jim Grant has been charging up the megaphone for another go at the GOP's favorite reason why we can't have nice things. Here you go already. So presumably the first thing I think about when I read this is about the discussion between the GOP and the socialists, between Trump and Sanders supporters, right? About whether we should have free education and all that stuff, and social welfare and all that stuff, or whether it should all be privatized. Obviously, both extremes are wrong. That's my position. But anyway, let's see what he's saying. Why we can't have nice things, the national debt. Alright, that's the reason why they can't have nice things. If you look at Europe, in Greece we have austerity because of national debt. It is very much a reason why we can't have nice things right now. Grant, winner of the 2016 Amity Schlees Award for mangling history and economics in the service of Republicans, that's something you made up apparently, follows a tag that's all too familiar to anyone who has been unlucky enough to listen to 5 minutes of economics news in the last 3 decades. Yeah, see, the news have a different... They have an ideology to push. They have an agenda, and so do you. To understand our financial fix, put yourself in the position of government. Say you earn the typical American family income, and you spend and borrow as the government does. That's just amazing. He thinks that you... So, okay, this is exactly how not to understand national debt. To clarify, he takes this out of context and he doesn't explain to you what he means. The guy is saying, I think Jim Grant, right? He's saying, imagine you make money, like a normal person, like a normal American household, but you spend and borrow like the government does. He doesn't mean as much money as the government does, because that's impossible, because you don't have that kind of money. But he says with the same tactics, with the same, the same way. with the same recklessness, you know. I think that's what he's saying. He's not saying spending that amount of money, you know. This is exactly how to not to understand national debt. The government is not a person. That doesn't mean anything. Obviously, it's not a person. The government is not a company. Well, now you're muddying the waters a bit. The way in which economy works with sovereign nations is nothing like how it deals, with the entities that operate under those sovereigns. No, it is, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And the reason for that is because it has national debt. And that national debt has interest, and the government is unable to pay for that, so it's continuously expected to keep making a profit. So it has to exploit everything it has, both private individuals as well as private companies. And private companies are the ones that evade debt, you know. So where does that leave the government? You know, but it doesn't evade debt, sorry, it evades also, yes, it evades taxes, obviously, sorry. The people have no capacity to do that unless they uproot themselves and go live somewhere else, you know, like expats do, and, you know, and work for some company somewhere else. As guest workers, you know, something like that. Again, these are not exactly things I'm completely familiar with, you know, but what I do understand is, yes, the government should be sovereign, but that only works if the banks are if the banks are nationalized, as well as the companies and all the means of productions belong to one entity. Only then is the government able to be sovereign. But that's not, you know, we see that as totalitarianism, so that's not going to happen. So then you're left with a government, with a nation that has the status of a company and that owes money to banks that have different interests because they, you know, they don't answer to that nation. You know, they answer to different instances. I don't know how to name that, how to call that. I know I have an idea as to who they are or whatever, but that's a different story, you know. They answer to their own interests, at least. Okay. The United States government has 13.9 trillion in debt, and I feel fine. You should too. No, you shouldn't. Well, you should, in a sense, because it's not your debt, and if you... But that's a different story. The government, after all, is immortal. No, it isn't. It doesn't have to pay back everything it owes like you or I do. And that's a good thing. No, it should be the other way around, by the way. But whatever. It just has to pay back the interest it owes, so that investors will keep lending it on good terms. Paying back the interest does not negate the debt. And the interest keeps building up, and so does the debt. That's the point of the interest. Because the value of money obviously becomes less, because more money is being printed. That's called inflation, right? Again, I'm green to all this, but give me some leeway here. And as you might have noticed, they are. No, they're not. Greece isn't, for example. They aren't able to pay back anything. So okay, imagine the national debt was on your credit card bit, along with calculating the national debt in the form of dollars distributed to every man and child on the nation, or tallying the debt with a clock ticking off imaginary values, is designed to do one thing: drive up anxiety about the debt. No, it's not. And it's not, you know, again, he's not saying literally the national debt was on your credit card, as far as I can understand from what you've cited here, because I'm not going to read further than this. What he means is, imagine your private debt, being something to the magnitude of the national debt. Something, how do you say that? It's obviously not the same, but it's not the same amount. He's not talking about the same amount. He's talking about an amount for a private individual that spends like the government. Alright, so if the government has about 13 trillion in debt, then I'd say you have like 5 million or something. Just something like that. Okay. Why that's horrible. I'll never get my MasterCard paid off with a number like that. Once you're properly frightened of the massive weight of dollars about to crush your children, you're ready for Grant's version of the right's surefire solution to debt. First, you have to get rid of the Federal Reserve, which helps the government mediate the changes in the demand for capital and moderate changes in the interest rate, or as conservatives put it, the Federal Reserve is the government's monopoly money machine. It sets some interest rates and influences many others. It materializes dollars. Yes, it literally does. So it already starts with what was it? Yes, I don't get. The Federal Reserve has not owned literal money. They haven't owned gold bullion or whatever. They don't base the value of their dollars on anything. They only create loans that people have to pay off. That idea that the government materializes dollars is a theme which Grant carries well past Buckley-esque rhetoric and into George William Heights of Flump. I don't know what these words are. The founders viewed money as a scale or a yardstick, something that measures value. The Fed views money as a magic wand, something that creates value. Dollars aren't so much minted these days. I would say money is still a yardstick, only the value keeps changing. So you can't get an agreement on anything. So anyway, on the value of anything. Dollars aren't so much minted these days, rather they issue from the Fed's computers in billowing digital clouds. The cost of producing them is only the energy expended on tapping the keys. The Fed emits these electronic greenbacks to attempt to control the course of economic events. It's a heaven-sent monetary system for big spending government. The Fed is not putting out shining tablets of gold properly adorned with the face of King George, George Washington, Ronald Reagan as God, and Republicans' insides of the brains of the founders intended. No. They're merely flipping bits in one of those computer-o-matics. It's almost as if the government is not required to run the economy through a pipeline from 1792. This is so asinine. This is so nasty what he's... it's so obvious you don't have an argument to back this up. You're just making shit up. You're just slandering them, you're just making ad homs and expecting that somehow it's going to make sense. It's not. It's a shame that we don't run the economy on overwrought rhetoric. Grant's article alone, which refers to the Constitution as that parchment and precious metals as monetary bedrock, would surely allow us to retire the debt of a few states. Why is Grant doing going to such ends? Well, what ends is he going to? He holds to the Constitution, which is, I think, is something, any American should do. And he holds to a fixed value of money. And yes, precious metals have so far been the only leverage we have had for money. If you start making shit up, then you don't know what the value is of it anymore. And, it shows from your article, but whatever. I don't ask that we return to some long-lost fiscal and monetary Eden. None has ever existed, even in America. Crises and business cycles are always with us. I merely observe that sound money and balanced budget were two sides of the coins of American prosperity. And I merely observe. Bull. Okay, let's see this again. It's never existed. Crises and business cycles are always with us. Okay. Observe that sound money and balanced budgets. I mean, how is he wrong? I don't see what he... And I merely observe bull, and furthermore shit. The idea that we had our best days during some debt-free gold standard period is not just laughable, it's contemptible. How? How is this contemptible? How is a debt-free period anything but admirable? Grant's whole exercise in throwing the red, white and blue trivets on an Ayn Rand table can really be brought down to 3 sentences. We've got a big debt because there is too much government. We should give millionaires a tax break and throw away the social safety net. Okay, maybe if that is his ideology, that is a bad thing. The thing is, yes, we need to tax the rich, obviously. We need to tax the people who exploit the system and make a profit out of it. So we need to tax bankers and that kind of people who actually get away with a lot, they lend illegal money and they make millions. So, that's what we should focus on. So no, we should not give millionaires a tax break, obviously. And the social safety net, if we tax the rich, then the social safety net can be afforded, I think. But whatever. In fact, it's pretty much the entire Republican argument is just usually delivered with much less pretense, amateur theatrics, and let me rummage through the box of old words appropriate for Grant Felderol. Okay. Here, let's pop back to Matt O'Brien for a moment. Grant says that this is all about helping the economy over long term, because don't you know, sound money and balanced budget were two sides of the American prosperity, of the coin of American prosperity. We can look at how the economy did during laissez-faire's heyday between 1880 and 1933, when small government and the gold standard went hand in hand. And now it's done in our post-war period, and how it's done in our post-war period of activist governments and central banks. Well, things have been a lot better in the post-war period than they were in the pre-New Deal one. So much for laissez-faire being the path of prosperity. Yes and no. I mean, I guess they're doing better because we have social welfare now and everything, so everybody's taken care of, I guess. So that's a good thing, yes, I agree. But that doesn't mean that the national debt is a problem, and that doesn't mean it needs to be eradicated in the best case. But I don't get how they don't. Okay, well, let's just finish this because it's just a few more paragraphs, and then I'll get to my own ideas about this. O'Brien has charts. You can go look. Unemployment under the digital cloud money of the Federal Reserve era has averaged about 6.1%. That's about a whopping lot better than the US did when men were men and money was heavy. Are both our current economy and our economic regulatory system out of sync with the way money moves around the world today? Yep, but in the opposite direction than Grant and company pretend. What they really fear is the kind of serious effort it would take to transform our long-in-the-tooth form of capitalism into something that is more supportive of general welfare in a time when automation is consolidating value and, hey, Look over there, a huge national debt run. Congrats, Jim. There's no trophy because okay. But it's not like he's completely wrong. I agree with him. You know, there should be a middle ground, by which you are able to tax the rich, the people who have exploited the system, or who exploit the system, you know, or who because there's a difference, you know, between the rich and successful, the actually successful people who are far and in between, and the ultra rich, you know, who all collude with each other and make millions out of putting people in debt. So we need to make that distinction as well. So what we need to single out is bankers and all these people. And, you know, especially the big ones, you know, because it's a pyramid scheme, so it shouldn't be hard to find them. They're at the top of the pyramid, it's obvious. And they should pay for all this. And it shouldn't be a big of... Even if they paid all of it, they would still have money left over to continue living their ludicrous lives, you know, so... I really don't see why all this is necessary. Why you need to refute the national debt, which is really a problem. If you go to Europe, it is a real crisis. It's not normal the way it has progressed. You know, it's not supposed to be that way, and it's all because of usury. It's all because money. No, it's all because money costs money. The banks ask a fee for lending you money, you know, and it's not a fixed fee either. It's interest. So the money devalues the longer you hold on to it. So it's toxic money. And you know, all the nations of the world are drowning in it because there's just no end to how much money they can create. So I hope you enjoyed, everyone, and I hope you understand why this was an important article for me to cover. And I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta.